Well, I'm Dave Keene. I'm chairman of the American Conservative Union, and as you know, we're sort of the lead organization in putting the Conservative Political Action Conference together. But it's not just our conference, because we've got 90 co-sponsors this year. It's a conservative movement-wide conference, and it has become very, very important since the first conference was held in 1973. We drew 125 people in 1973, and the speaker was Ronald Reagan. This year we're having 9,000 people, and the speakers are everybody. And in recent years, the conference has not only been growing, but as you know from being here, that roughly half of the people who come are college students. And so we expect upwards of 4,000 college students here this weekend, along with others. Some people have been coming to this conference for decades. And it's a chance for conservatives to get together, to debate ideas and issues, to see how to apply their philosophical underlying beliefs to new problems, to organize, and as somebody put it, to recharge their batteries. And I suggested earlier today to somebody that given the mainstream media reports on the demise of the conservative movement as a result of Republican losses last fall, that liberals would do well to come here, and they might see that they posted the obituary just a tad early, because this is not only the largest conference we've ever held, but the atmosphere and the energy here tells me that conservatives are looking not at problems but at challenges, and they're looking at an opportunity to get Republicans back on track. It's a mistake to identify the Republican Party and conservatism as the same. But the Republican Party is the vehicle through which virtually all conservatives channel their political activity. So when the Republican Party gets off track, they've got a problem. And what they see now is an opportunity to get the party back on track, and I think they're going to be fighting to do that. So I think it's going to be exciting times ahead.
Absolutely. What would you say, in your mind, if there were a couple of top issues that Republicans really had the momentum going, or conservatives had the momentum going on, what would you kind of categorize those as?
Well, as we go forward, a couple of things always happen when somebody wins an election, and this has happened already as a result of the 2008 presidential election and the congressional election. The exit polls revealed after the last election that what the American people were doing was reacting against what they saw as poor Republican performance. They weren't reacting against or rejecting conservative values. They were firing folks who they didn't think were doing a very good job, both in Congress and at the White House. As a result, the Obama administration comes into existence. But politicians who win elections always make the same mistake. They think that people voted for them for the reasons they wanted people to vote for them. So as president, Barack Obama has decided that he now has a mandate to change the American economic system, to spend trillions of dollars, to change all of the social policies and the positions of the government, and that's the change that he was for. It's not the change the American people voted for. The result of that is that there's going to be a reaction to it. And I am very optimistic for a couple of reasons. Some people said, well, are you hoping that Obama fails? No, we're not. It would be great if he solved our economic problems and we move forward. But I know he won't. And the reason I know he won't is that the policies that they're following won't work. History demonstrates they won't work. Economics demonstrate they won't work. What they'll do is create inflation. They'll probably end up at some point into a situation we had at the end of the Carter years, because this is what it turns out is that this administration is sort of Jimmy Carter on steroids, if you will, spending even more money, building up even more debt, threatening to raise even more taxes, and increasing the money supply to the extent that we're going to have an inflationary problem, and then what was come to be known as stagflation, with high unemployment and high inflation. Now, what does that mean? That's bad for the country, bad for the people, bad for the taxpayers. It's also bad for them because the public has more sense than they do and is going to come back around, and conservatives are going to win, not on new positions. Every time you suffer a political loss, people come out of the woodwork and say, the reason you lost is that your beliefs are wrong. So we've had people saying in the last few months, this idea of limited government, that was fine maybe for the founders or maybe for Reagan, but it's passé now. We need bigger government. You need to be government manager. I find it hard to believe that Republicans at this point could argue they're better managers than anybody else, since they didn't manage very well when they had a chance. But it's wrong to assume that these values are wrong. I talked to a number of Republican congressmen before the vote on the first so-called stimulus package, and I said the last thing that you should do is vote against this for partisan reasons. If you think this will work, you owe it to your constituents, you owe it to the country to vote with the president. Of course, then you ought to take up knitting, because what you'll have to do that is admit to yourself, at least, that everything you believe is wrong. Well, everything we believe isn't wrong. And as a consequence, I think the future is very bright for us, because what's happened, and there'll be costs to this, but what's happened is right now the government and the country is being governed by people who are not in step with the basic values of the American people, and who are pursuing policies that aren't going to work. So while they may win an election, they're not likely to prevail in the long term. You know, Barack Obama is only the third Democrat in a half century to get a majority of the vote. The other two were Lyndon Johnson in 1964 and Jimmy Carter in 1976. And as I recall, in 1968 and in 1980, Republicans came back and took the White House. So if that history is any guide, it tells you something. What it really tells you, though, is that in politics, there aren't, you know, you can view politics in various ways. In one way, it's a war of ideas and a war of policies. It's a war that never ends. You can win a battle and you can lose a battle, but you don't win the war unless human nature changes. So those who share our values, those who believe in freedom and free markets and limited government, have to get up every day and go out and fight for those values. It's that simple. They'll win some, they'll lose some, but they'll win more than they lose.
That's great. If you don't mind, I'd like to just ask you real quick a little bit about American Future Fund, which I said before.
Very important, because what conservatives are looking to now is a whole new generation of leadership and a whole new generation of people with ideas. I was talking earlier, you know, I was involved in the '76 Reagan campaign, and I went back and looked at some of the tapes, and I said, my God, what we were thinking. We were all kids. Well, kids, from my perspective, are people in their late 20s and 30s, are the people that change societies and change countries. So what you're doing is incredibly important.